Sanitation Graduate School is the world's largest platform for capacity building in citywide inclusive sanitation. We offer educational programs in sanitation with a focus on participants from low and middle income countries. We are expanding rapidly and welcome new members. Interested? Contact us today, www.sanitationeducation.org.
Good morning. This is Shahidul Islam from Bangladesh.
Good morning. Welcome to Bangladesh. This is Marc. It's Casas. So welcome to SMB in Bangladesh. This is the Integrated Municipal Information System, and we are very excited to share with all of you this tool that will help the local authorities for planning, monitoring, and manages the urban services. So actually, the IMIS is a web GIS-based information system which basically connects the existing databases in Excel file and other formats through a map. So actually, we add this spatial attribute into the existing databases. These enable for information-based decision-making and spatial-based decision-making for city investment planning. The IMIS is a useful management system for governments, utilities, and service providers for a more efficient and transparent services. How the system can help the municipalities, for example, to track the status of the payments, holding tax or water tariff or waste tariffs. Also to manage the service delivery for FSM, sewage, and others, from application, service, collecting the feedback, etc. Also to monitor the performance of the services through the key performance indicators. And also through the mobile applications, we can update the GIS databases directly from the field. The IMIS was designed originally for FSM services, but later we start connecting with the holding ID, linking with the building routine. Actually, the holding ID is the unique identifier of the buildings. So this was a turning point for the system, as it enabled to connect many other municipal services like water supply, solid waste, holding taxes, and many others.
IMIS has three key functions: reporting through dashboard, managing the services, and GIS-based planning analysis for planning and service provision. So the first function is reporting. So it shows the real-time status of the services, and it can integrate to the key performance indicators. And this dashboard can easily be customized depending upon the requirement of the municipalities. The second function is managing the services, and in order to provide the services, there is a web-based applications for desk-based office use. And for field level data input, so there are a couple of mobile applications, and the IMIS can easily be integrated with local and national databases. The IMIS does not introduce a new system; rather, it integrates the existing business processes with the digital systems with the minimum customization. Here, also in order to provide the MP tempting services, IMIS link up with all the steps that service providers follow, starting from the application from the customers to the real service provision and follow-up and monitoring. So, and the last function is the GIS-based analysis. IMIS can integrate both the spatial and non-spatial data and analyze them and visualize the results on the map. IMIS can also identify the buffer areas, and at the end of the presentation, we'll demonstrate live of this buffer area.
So the IMIS took several years for its development and many back and forth. But now that the system is finally ready, its replication is quite straightforward. So this process starts with the collection of the GIS data, the existing secondary data, or we collect into the field. Also, we add additional surveys, census information, and other databases. And then we customize the platform, one platform for each of the city. We migrate the data of that city, and then we train and we launch the system. Currently, SMB has supported 4 cities to develop the system. In Jinaida, there is a census of the 27,000 buildings, and we have all the 20,000 containments that exist in the city. We know exactly where all the septic tanks and pit latrines are located. Jinaida is using the system for Faecal sludge management service at this moment. In Kulna, we have also the census of 150,000 buildings, and the 67,000 containments that the city corporation will use it for FSM services, holding tax, and also they are planning for trade license. In Gazipur, which is also a very big city, we selected 2 of the high-dense zones, and we collected also the information, census-based, of the 130,000 buildings with all the information about the containments, the connection to the water supply, and others. The city will use the IMIS for FSM services, sewerage, holding, and also water supply. And also in other smaller cities like Cheshire, we collected information of 1 ward now, and it will also be used for FSM service and holding.
Of course, there are a few challenges associated with the implementation of the IMIS. So the data the municipality have are not comprehensive enough and not updated, and it is very difficult to get access to this data. Holding ID is the key to the IMIS system, and there is no nomenclature in Bangladesh for holding ID. And we know that adapting changes is always a challenge in any organization. And finally, the hosting data is requires a significant amount of fee to be borne by the municipalities, and we are negotiating with the central government to reduce or waive the fee. The potentials of IMS is endless. So, for example, the cities having multiple authorities providing the services can share their data through the IMS for better coordination. So the online payment system can be used for payment, paying the taxes and the service fees. And the IMS can also be linked to the national databases. For example, the health information system, if linked to the IMS, can monitor the, for example, COVID-19 cases in a particular municipality with their geographical distribution.
So let's log into the system. Welcome to the Jinaida IMIS. This is the basic dashboard with all the buildings and the type of the buildings. The FSM service dashboard with all the existing 35, for example, services provided during this year, 2021, and the different graphs here below that we can be used for different indicators. So let's go, for example, to some of the models. Here, the building ones, the utilities, FSM services. So we can see in the applications, for example, the latest applications in Jinaida. And here with the lists, we have all the applications, and we are gonna select, for example, this application here. We have different actions. We can go directly to the map to see exactly where this containment, which was emptied last month, is located. We see some layers here in the right side. We can enable or disable any of those layers. We can add at the background Google Street information, OpenStreetMap, or other Google satellite information. We can also enable water bodies or disable landmarks. So then we can zoom into the building that we selected, the containment actually that we selected, and we can see the information from selecting the containment. We can see the information of that. This is a pit latrine actually in ward number 1. The size is 3 cubic meters, and it served for people in this household. It's connected to that road. And also we see the information about when is the next emptying date that it should be emptied, that containment. We can also see information about its building, the tax code, the number of floors, the area, or other information about the structure type or the function of it. So now let's see one of the functionalities for analysis. We can select the water bodies buffer summary. So we will select one of the water bodies, let's say this Jinaida River, and we can set a buffer area of 30 meters. So it will show us the information about all the buildings and containments within this buffer area. So for example, there's around 500 buildings in this area with 374 pit latrines. And this is very useful, for example, for rainy seasons to identify the potential buildings that can be affected by the raise of the water table and overflowing of the latrines. And then, of course, the data weakness. So this is a very brief demonstration of the system.
So this initiative is particularly aligned with this government initiative for Digital Bangladesh. And we hope that central government will take up this issue and overcome these challenges and replicate across the country. Thank you all for your patience hearing, and for further information, please contact us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cinderella Eco Group is dedicated to provide safe sanitation with projects launched in Greenland to combat environmental and health hazards. The Cinderella incineration toilet is water-free and burns all waste. The only outcome is sterile ash, free of all pathogens, sustainable.
Hi, my name is Freya Mills, and I'm presenting a recent research project on improving containment in dense, low-income areas, focusing on the common yet unsafe practice of septic tanks discharging to drains. This research was conducted in partnership between University of Technology Sydney, Emory University, and ICDERB, and was funded through WASUP and UK Aid. I'll present research from Bangladesh, where I investigated the health risks of sanitation in a dense urban slum in Dhaka. This research found that septic tanks are being built discharging directly to open drains, which, despite functioning as designed, pose significant health risks as the effluent from these systems contains high concentrations of pathogens. While performing slightly better than direct discharge from toilets, the project questions the benefit of installing septic tanks in conditions where the necessary steps of soil infiltration is unsuitable, and found that effluent must therefore be piped for further treatment to reduce health risks. Even back in 1992, World Health Organization's Sanitation Manual stated that the problem with septic tank systems arises because inadequate consideration is given to the disposal of the tank effluent. This continues today, with effluent from on-site systems often missing from diagrams, missing from discourse, and missing in practice. This research was part of a larger project on the modelling of pathogen flows and health risks from sanitation systems. The objective of this part of the research was to understand the use, function, and performance of septic tanks in the actual conditions that they are used, rather than laboratory-based and in developing country context where most research has been undertaken. The focus of the research was to analyse the pathogen concentration from septic tank effluent and open drains to understand the health risks to the public. As evident from the Global Water Pathogen Project, the data on pathogens in septic tanks is limited, unclear, and mostly from developed countries where the conditions of operating are very different. The study collected data from one low-income neighbourhood of Dhaka that uses a mix of toilets discharging to drains and septic tanks. We assessed 173 compounds serving over almost 5,000 residents, which was almost full coverage of the site. Samples were collected from 22 septic tank effluents and 30 open drains and were analysed for a range of pathogens. The team also measured the sludge depth of 7 septic tanks. The main limitation of this study was the small sample size, both in the single location in Dhaka and the small number of environmental and septic tank samples. This is limited due to cost of testing for multiple pathogens and the infield challenges of monitoring septic tanks. As the septic tanks in this site were built by NGO over the last 5 years, they were known dimensions and allowed accurate analysis of how the systems were functioning. These toilets, along with most toilets in developing low-income areas of Dhaka, were shared by multiple families. The septic tanks in this site included 2 toilet pans discharging to 1 septic tank that were flushed with pipe water that came into the compound. While all septic tanks in this community were designed for 50 users, on average there are only 25 users. However, we do not consider the tanks oversized since the design assumption of annual emptying is too short, particularly as only 2 of the 40 systems had ever been emptied. Considering the sludge accumulation rate calculated from sludge depth measurements and water use, the tanks were assessed that whether they were overloading or still operating within the 2/3 full design criteria. At the time of the survey, most of these tanks were not yet overloaded, and therefore the following results can be considered applicable to septic tanks operating as intended. The septic tank systems consist of the tank and the infiltration system or soak pit. Both of these parts are integral for the sanitation solution, as the septic tank must retain solids to prevent blocking the soak pit, and the infiltration through soil provides the majority of treatment, particularly for pathogens. Despite this, all of the tanks in the study site discharged to an open drain. And now that data on management of effluent is increasingly being included in monitoring for SFD and JMP analysis, it is evident that septic tanks discharging to drains is a global issue. The analysis of septic tank performance relied on an estimate of inflow concentration, as physically assessing the influent and taking a representative sample is very difficult. The tanks received only black water, with grey water directly discharged to the ground or drain. Based on 22 effluent samples, the log reduction between the estimated inflow and the measured effluent was between 0.8 log per 100 mil for Giardia and 2.4 log for cholera and Shigella. Often the reduction for septic tanks is reported to be 0 to 2 log or 99% reduction. It is not clear often whether this refers to the influent and effluent or also considers sludge, and it's not typically estimated for different pathogens as was done by this project. However, as shown in the figure, despite 99% reduction, it's important to consider that the actual concentration of effluent, which remains high, between 3 to 6 log per 100 mil. Septic tanks also offered some reduction to the pathogen concentration in drains. Statistical analysis was conducted to assess the association between the observed pathogen concentration in drains and the population using septic tanks in each of the 4 streets of the study site. This found that an increase in septic tank use was associated with improved drain quality, with significant results for Giardia and Shigella. When estimating the probability of illness for QMRE modelling, it was evident that the relationship between illness and pathogen concentrations is not linear. To understand the relative extent to which the reduction in concentration was associated with health risk, we compared the probability of illness of an assumed 1 millimetre ingestion of the estimated concentration of the raw black water, say from toilet direct discharge, with 1 millimetre ingested from the effluent from septic tanks. Comparing results for Shigella and norovirus and cholera shows that log reduction doesn't translate directly to health risk reduction and highlights the importance of considering the effluent concentration in designing sanitation improvement systems, rather than just the log reduction as is sometimes used in assessment tools. Understanding how sludge depth influences effluent concentrations is an important question given the number of septic tanks discharging to drains and the sector's focus on emptying and its benefits for public health. We assess this through measuring the sludge depth in comparison with effluent quality and comparing the effluent quality from an emptied tank with other unemptied tanks of similar age and use. However, due to the small sample size, the results are inconclusive and further research is needed to answer this important question. As mentioned previously, this research is connected with a large project of modelling pathogen flows and improvement options. The analysis found that high risk remained if all residents use septic tanks. To reduce risks and have a positive impact on public health, it was necessary to pipe effluent with further treatment, either as professionally managed or decentralised treatment or as a centralised treatment system. This project also investigated ABRs, which are similar to septic tanks in their limited removal of pathogens and need for further effluent treatment, despite many ABRs also being installed directly discharging to drains. For areas where soil infiltration is not suitable, such as areas of shallow groundwater, high density and low permeability soils, such as in Dhaka, there needs to be management of effluent through alternative means. This raises the question whether septic tanks or on-site sanitation solutions are necessarily the best option for these areas. This research has raised some questions for the sector that still need to be addressed. Firstly, to what extent does dislodging septic tanks improve pathogen removal and effluent quality, and therefore help reduce the health risk or not? What alternative options to retrofit and improve existing systems exist, such as effluent filters, above surface filtration, or extra chambers on the filter tank? Or do we need other solutions and to move away from household level treatment, such as professionally managed community or neighbourhood scale systems with adequate treatment for pathogens? Thirdly, why are these systems still being built when they shouldn't? What else do we need to address this issue? Knowledge, building regulations, or something else? And also we need to highlight that wet pit latrines also discharge and have overflows to the living environment, particularly in poor ground conditions. Has this issue been looked at, and is it a similar concern to that of the septic tank effluent? To conclude, this research has highlighted the hazard that septic tank effluent poses to public health, particularly in these low-income areas where there is high exposure to open drains, and that the waste is then further spread through heavy rainfall and flooding. Septic tank systems require management of the effluent, and soil infiltration is an important part of the treatment process. Septic tanks alone provide some pathogen reduction, but it's not enough. It's important to start considering effluent management in design, in monitoring, in discourse, and importantly in practice. This research will hopefully be published in the coming few months and is also connected to 2 existing published papers associated with this research project. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to taking your questions in the FSM conference.
is Nicola Greene, and I'm a fecal sludge management consultant based in Nairobi, Kenya. So today I'm presenting work on behalf of Triangle Environmental and North Carolina State University, where we quantified the largest invisible market in our FSM world, manual pit latrine emptying. So a little background on the original purpose of this work. NCSU has been working for the past several years on novel pit emptying technology called the excluder, which you can see in this image. So this technology targets pits that cannot be emptied by traditional mechanical means by excluding trash. So our goal in undertaking this work was therefore to identify markets for the pit emptying technology. In doing so, we needed to both classify and quantify service typologies for on-site sanitation to see where such a piece of equipment would be needed and in what quantities. So when I talk about classifying emptying of on-site sanitation facilities, we consider three main types of emptying. We have mechanized emptying that takes place at a containment facility that can be emptied by a pump, that might be a trash pump or an exhauster truck. We also have non-mechanized emptying, so that happens at a containment facility where it would not be possible to use a pump, and that's usually due to trash, limits of access, or thick contents. So those end up being manually emptied quite often. And we also have unemptiable pits that might collapse if someone attempts to empty them. So if we zoom out to the bigger picture of why this is important, oftentimes to have a system that can be emptied by a non-mechanized means or by unemptiable means that we can break the safely managed sanitation chain. So waste removed via non-mechanized emptying or manual emptying often doesn't reach a treatment facility. And sometimes an unemptiable pit, once it's filled, is not replaced. So that's the critical consideration in this work beyond the technology. What's the pathway to safely managed sanitation after these types of emptying? So we proceeded to consider the balance between these three markets globally. What's the split of these markets across the world? Mechanized, non-mechanized, and unemptiable. So to do this, we went to JMP data and we tried to map technology types to our service types. So on-site sanitation types are septic tanks, improved pit latrines, and unimproved pit latrines. So of course, for this, we had to make some generalizations and assumptions. For septic tanks, we considered that 100% of these should be emptiable via mechanized emptying, whether it be via a simple trash pump or an exhauster truck. These tanks should be wet, they have less trash due to the user interface, and they should be emptied via mechanized means. We applied a similar blanket approach to unimproved pit latrines, which you can see across the bottom of the slide. So we considered 100% of unimproved pit latrines to be unemptiable. We assumed that if a pit is a low quality, it may collapse when it's being emptied, or it may not be worthy of emptying due to the low investment. So improved pit latrines are a bit more diverse. So to consider which ones of those might be emptied via mechanized means, we looked first at which ones were wet and dry. So for this, we used access to water as a proxy. We considered that all dry pit latrines were emptied via non-mechanized means. For wet pits, things got a bit more tricky. So we used a survey of exhauster truck operators and manual pit latrine emptiers to apply proportions of these pits that might have trash or accessibility issues that prevented mechanized emptying. And we made the splits according to the percentages that you can see on the slide. So when we split all the markets down, this is what we found. So overall, we looked at 6 SDG regions. In these regions, there are 3.5 billion people served by 722 million on-site household sanitation facilities. Of these facilities, we estimated overall that 32% of the facilities can be emptied by mechanized means, 50% by non-mechanized, and that 18% of on-site sanitation facilities in these regions are unemptiable. So if we look at the map, we can see the proportions and volumes and how they vary across our SDG regions of interest. For each SDG region, you'll see a small bubble. So that bubble shows the number of household level on-site sanitation facilities in that region. And underneath that is the percentage of the population using on-site sanitation facilities. So you can see how those vary across the regions. In the larger bubble, you'll see how these facilities are broken down across the three service type: mechanized, non-mechanized, and unemptiable. So you can see we've got a large variation from region to region in terms of places where we have dry, unemptiable pits and where we have water-based systems that can be emptied via an exhauster truck. So we zoomed in closer at the non-mechanized segment, given that it was the largest segment, but also that it was the segment that the excluder aims to address. So for this service type, we looked at volume, but we also looked at the density of the segment, i.e. what proportion of the population in a given country it made up. We also considered whether the population in that segment was urban or rural, which you can see in the hashing in the graph. We pulled the largest three markets from each region to compare which countries are dominated by this service type. So we can see on the far left, the volume is represented in the bars, that India and China have as many pits to empty via non-mechanized means as the rest of the world combined. But we can also see that many of these are in rural areas and may be difficult to access and capture the waste. We can see that by volume, the need is relatively low in sub-Saharan Africa, but by density, we are often looking at more than 50% of a country's population. In East and Southeastern Asia, we've both high volume and density, making it a key area for a technology like the excluder, but also a key place to understand the pathways for a non-mechanized emptying service to empty the safely managed sanitation chain. So while this was a technology-oriented study, the pathway from non-mechanized emptying to safely managed sanitation will not be solved by technology alone. Of course, these highlighted countries need a diversity of technologies to cleanly remove waste from containment facilities. They also need a network of decentralized treatment facilities to handle this waste. Eventually, these pits also need to be upgraded to become mechanically emptyable. The countries we've highlighted should also be hotspots for public-private partnerships to support both the private sector and the public sector to reach the marginalized, and also need a proactive enabling environment to legitimize and support the manual emptying practice that for now needs to take place to remove the waste from these pits and keep them functional. Overall, we need more knowledge and case studies of best practice and investment strategies in navigating from often illegal, non-mechanized or manual emptying to safely managed sanitation. So that's it from me, but we have data available on a country-by-country basis, and we also have data on all of those markets individually, so the mechanized, non-mechanized, and the unemptiable. We've written a paper on this topic, and that'll appear in the upcoming FSM edition of the Journal of Environmental Management. But if you want any of this data, please also feel free to get in touch with me. My email is nicola@operoservices.com. That's NICOLA@opero-services.com. Thank you for your time.
So my name is Ato Kwamena Senayah from Ghana. I work with Trend Group as a program coordinator. I'll be presenting on the topic From Evidence to Action, Exposure Risk Assessment towards Prioritizing Wash Improvement in Kumasi, Ghana. This has been a work with multiple partnerships with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the technical work led by the Center for Global Safe Wash in Emory University, SANIPA team in Center for Global Safe Wash. We've had other collaborations with the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology and the city where this work was hosted, that is the Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly in Ghana. The sanitation challenge in Kumasi is such that most urban areas and largely in Ghana face poor fecal sludge management. And several studies have found high level of fecal contamination via multiple routes, especially in the low-income urban communities. However, most municipalities in Ghana and most part of the global south lack data and tools to track the fecal contamination pathways and assess the associated public health risks that comes with poor FSM. In such low resource context, city authorities have no systematic approach in prioritizing and implementing interventions. On the sheet flow diagram that is shown on my left, you realize that as of 2015, only 55% of the fecal sludge in Kumasi was safely managed. In Ghana, out of every 10 households, about 8 of every 10 households have E. coli in their drinking water. The 45% of fecal sludge that is unsafely managed ends up in the open environment. That compromises the quality of water available to most households in Ghana. Kumasi is the largest city, the second largest city in Ghana, with a population of 2.5 million, and about 40% of its population relies on public toilets. Still in Ghana, 25% of households have access to basic sanitation, which means that there's a lot of households that have limited access to safely managed toilet facilities. These challenges in the urban environment means that a lot of exposure, given the complex exposure routes with different levels of contamination and the type of exposure, it has been difficult to determine the sets of intervention that will have the biggest impact on the reduction in exposure. The Sanitation tool is designed to assess public health risks that relates to poor sanitation and to help prioritize sanitation investments based on exposures that have the greatest public health impact. And in doing this, introducing this tool through the collaboration I mentioned, this tool was introduced to the Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly to support them to assess the risks associated with poor FSM and also to be able to prioritize interventions in the sanitation sector. The strategy for implementation of this project was first the creating of awareness and stakeholder engagement, generating evidence to support planning and design of interventions, then results to action. The last part of it is policy influence, where we are using these results and outcomes of these projects to influence the way we think about environmental risks, the way we think about fecal sludge management in cities and low resource contexts, and to initiate evidence-based planning in sanitation. So this we are doing is to contribute to how we plan for sanitation in low resource context. In creating awareness and stakeholder engagement, we first engage the key stakeholders in the Metropolitan Assembly, where we inform them about, introduce them to the tool and what the tool is able to do, the kind of data the tool can generate, and how the tool can support in planning. Through that, we signed an MOU between the Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly and Trend. And through the MOU, the Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly made available environmental health staff to support the implementation of the Sanitation tool. Organization of project inception workshops helped us engage more stakeholders beyond the municipal assembly. So we engage food vendors, we engage local assembly members, local authority members, we engage community members, community leaders, and even the media to introduce the tool and showcase some of the previous studies that the tool has been used in, and the kind of results the tool generates about the urban environment. Through this engagement, the relevant officials were informed about this initiative, and through their support, we brought together a core group that formed the project committee or the project working group, which was made up of urban planners, development planners, environmental health officers, community development officers, who have relevant roles to play in the urban development and community development in the various communities that we studied. Through these discussions, we were able to select some communities to pilot the studies in Kumasi. In generating the evidence, the team in Kumasi were trained on the Sanipa tool and were supported to understand the approaches and the methodologies of the tool. Through that, we had a partnership with a team from KNUST, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, where they supported with laboratory training for the environmental health officers. The environmental health officers were put into a team, and they managed, the staff managed the deployment of the Sanipa tool in 4 neighborhoods in the city of Kumasi. Throughout the deployment of the tool, there were various debriefing sessions to interact and discuss the processes and to learn from the processes of implementing the tool in these neighborhoods that were the target communities for this study. So these are pictures showing the community data collection, the environmental sample activities that were done by staff of the municipality. So the interaction with school children, the interaction with adults in the communities, both males and females, to ensure gender participation at all ends. So this represents the 4 neighborhoods that were selected in the study, and these were the key results from the 4 neighborhoods. And from the key results from the 4 neighborhoods, the results show that drain and raw produce have the highest concentration of E. coli and were the most dominant pathways of fecal contamination in the 4 neighborhoods. So these represent the summaries of the results. There were other results that reflected contaminations in municipal water, contamination in public toilets, facilities, contamination in street food, contamination in bathing water, and all that. So results to action. How do we act based on these evidence that have been generated? Like I mentioned, there are some results that showed contamination of the municipal water that was supplied into these neighborhoods by the Ghana Water Company Limited. And one of the first actions that were undertaken on the project was to interact with the Ghana Water Company to discuss the result. So we shared the result with the Ghana Water Company, and given the sensitive nature of such a result and given the reliability of their systems, they decided to take a second look of the data that we reported. So together we built a collaboration and undertook another field study focusing on the pathway drinking water. And through that, we realized that most of the contamination happening were within environmental areas, and therefore there was a need to implement strategies that will improve environmental conditions of public water points and some public standpipes and other areas where the pipelines of the utility company traverses the community. And these were very useful discussions during the implementation of the project. Again, through the immediate actions that were taken based on the evidence that was generated, we realized that one of the points of the contamination was the surface water. And the surface water in the community was being contaminated because a public toilet facility was dislodging directly into the local river in the community. And as a result, the public health officers in the city took action to close down that facility. Some of the results that were generated was about how the contaminations at school facilities and other things. So quickly, the public health staff in the city started a hygiene behavior change education program in the local schools in the community to educate the kids about proper hand washing, which I'm sure have been very vital, even given the pandemic situation where we need to wash our hands with soap and all that. Also, there was a need to engage the Food and Drugs Authority, given the kind of feedback we had on street food and raw produce, where there are high concentration of E. coli in samples that were picked for street food and raw produce. And these interactions have been very useful in helping the Kumasi City Authority to strategize in how to ensure street food safety going forward. As part of the results to action, there were evidence-based decision-making. What was more critical was how does the Metro Authority uses these data that have been generated to impact their planning processes, to impact decisions about what to do, what to prioritize, what interventions to implement. So the analysis of the results from the study led to decisions being taken about possible areas of intervention. And through that, some of the key intervention areas that were noted were to increase investment in the value chain, to improve safe sludge management and household toilet promotion. So just along the entire value chain, from the capture, containment to treatment and other stages along the chain. Also more critical was the need to develop protocols and standards to ensure street food safety and quality compliance for street food vendors in communities that were part of the study. The development of protocols to regulate hygiene standards at water vending sites were very relevant, because on the second look at the data, we realized that up high the stream, you realize that the water supply from the production points were without E. coli, but then within the environmental areas and community areas, we realized that we had samples that had E. coli, and these were very critical, and as such, there was a need to relook at protocols to regulate the hygiene standards at water vending sites. The need for development and implementation of standards to ensure public toilet facilities are hygienically managed. This is because these facilities are used by several households. And as I mentioned, about 55% of households in Ghana or in these cities in Kumasi rely on public toilet facilities, 40% in Kumasi and 55% in Accra. So this is one of the critical pathways that required attention. So there was a need to design standards to ensure that people who use these facilities, before they could acquire their own facilities through the household promotion, in the meantime, they need to acquire their facility. They are still protected when they visit these public areas. So like I mentioned, through the evidence and the data that was generated, the Kumasi city was able to develop a waste management plan based on the evidence. So evidence-based planning. This I'm showing is an excerpt from the waste management action plan that was developed by the city, and it has a number of issues that came up in the results that we generated. So to develop standards, protocols to guide street food vendors, public water vendors, and all that. So these were the direct action from the results that we obtained from the study. So in improving its general sanitation planning, it was able to prioritize some intervention. And the picture here shows some of the ongoing school hygiene education and wash improvement. So as part of the work that was being done, Kumasi City prioritized wash improvement in schools. So these facilities were newly constructed toilet facilities for some local schools. Beyond that, other intervention that is still ongoing in the city is household sanitation promotion and campaign, further investment in fecal sludge management at the treatment site in Kumasi, and adoption of evidence-based planning approaches in monitoring and tracking the performance of various households in getting safely managed sanitation. So through this work, our collaboration with Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly and other partners like WhatsApp and other organizations who were supporting the work that Kumasi was doing. Kumasi was adjudged the best municipal authority in liquid waste management during a Sanitation Challenge Awards in 2019 that was organized for state actors, and they emerged the top municipality out of over 200 municipalities in Ghana who are performing very well in municipal liquid waste management. Also, as part of this activities, based on our collaboration with Kumasi, the Sanipat 2 was also awarded for being an innovative tool for capacity building for municipalities and local authorities in Ghana as part of the Sanitation Challenge Awards for the private sector and non-state actors category. So based on our working with Kumasi and the initiative to introduce the tool, we won an award as well. So in terms of challenges and lessons, in order to implement this tool, one of the obvious lessons we've come across is that there needs to be a champion at the municipality. You need to interact with the stakeholders, and through your interaction, you need to have a champion who would support these evidence-based processes, who would support evidence-informed decision-making. Not that we just would throw millions of cities to construct something, but it should be backed by real proof, suggesting this is the area where when we invest, we will get the biggest return out of. Also, it takes patience and time to get a buy-in. So it's not just you go into a municipality and they are open to this, but with time, they get to support and with good interactions, they get to buy into this, and it's good. Generally, one of the challenges is that there's a low profile for evidence-based processes in Ghana and largely the global south. The action is that, yes, there's poor sanitation. People don't have toilet, let's build toilet. But then beyond that, yes, there's a need to build toilet, there's a need to invest in various interventions. But what amount of evidence support what we are doing? How would that help to prioritize the already low resources that is characterized by these and in these contexts that we are? So it is very important that we need to keep encouraging evidence-based planning and prioritization of interventions in these contexts. Also, we find out that the laboratory requirements that is required in rolling out Sanipat 2 sometimes have limitations for some cities to be open to this. And as a result, further partnerships may be required to roll out this tool. And that's why we further partner with the university in Kumasi to support with the laboratory processes. Also, the sensitivity of the result that is generated needs to be managed in dissemination. So for instance, we realized that there was results showing E. coli presence in the municipal water that is distributed across the city. Given the sensitivity of this result, there was a need to further engage the utility company to probe further to know the extent of these situations and to have a more responsive and appropriate solution to this than just going out into the media and throwing this whole information out there. It breaks the chain of interaction and partnership. So we realize that it's also important to encourage good partnerships for implementing the results that comes out of this process. Stakeholder engagement throughout the process is very relevant. So it's important that from the beginning to the end and beyond, you need to engage with stakeholders. You need to engage with community leaders, talk to stakeholders, because they need to take actions beyond the result. So it's not just results, but then beyond the results, from evidence to action. So in order to have a good relationship with them so that they can act on the evidence you share, it is good to keep stakeholder processes running. In looking at the wider implications of this project, The Sanipar 2 generates critical evidence that provide the basis for decision making in sanitation, especially for low resource communities where there's limited resources, and as a result, interventions and investments needs to be prioritized. So this is something that is very important, and we're hoping that this could be adopted by a number of cities in Africa in order to direct the kind of interventions and investment they make in sanitation. Also, based on the evidence, municipal authorities are able to develop waste management action plans. And this is very important because it guides what should you plan for, what should be your priorities, what other options should you look at. For instance, most officers from the city suggested that beyond the everyday toilet promotion and other things, they never will look at things like street food, raw produce as being impacted by poor FSM. And as a result of this work, they were drawn to other areas beyond the everyday areas that they work in. Also, the Sanipar 2 offered an opportunity to build a capacity of public health officers in the city of Kumasi to adopt evidence-based approaches, which has been very useful. This also provided further basis for policy actions in terms of hygiene promotion and enforcement of sanitation regulations, especially around the issues of water vending, around the issues of public toilet use. Definitely there's a mass of the populations in cities across Africa who do not have toilet facilities. And in the meantime, they rely on these public facilities. In as much as we are working to get households to own their own toilet, there's a need to pay attention at these facilities and improve the hygiene situations in these areas. And this has generated some policy discourse in Ghana, and we are very happy we could contribute to this debate. The Sanipar 2 is useful for supporting sanitation planning and prioritizing investment. And as we have shown in this presentation, especially for low resource urban settings, this tool has shown very useful returns in planning of sanitation and investment. So we are hopeful that through this sharing, a lot more cities will be open to looking at the Sanipar 2 and exploring its use. So for more information, you can look at the sanipart.org or send us an email, and we'll be happy to interact on this.
Hi all, thanks for joining in. This presentation was prepared together with my colleague from Ghana, Wuntia Gomda. Myself, I'm Jos van der End. I'm Research and Development Manager of Safi Sana. I've been involved with the development of Safi Sana concept for more than 10 years now, from the early beginnings. At Safi Sana, we run, design, build, and operate Faecal sludge plants or factories. We currently have a factory in Ghana, West Africa, where we combine fecal waste together with organic waste from markets and from industries. From that, we can generate electricity from the biogas, which we feed back into the grid, and we can produce biofertilizer and irrigation water to bring back the nutrients to the agriculture. When we started with a pilot about 10 years ago, we faced a problem with data being difficult available, so it was a bit locked in the local measurements. So we soon started experimenting with mobile phones, where the team at the pilot in the field could fill in the data and that would be sent through the internet directly to our spreadsheets. Over time, these spreadsheets became a bit more complicated, so we started moving towards databases, where we also are using dedicated or visualization software like Power BI, which allow us to present the data in a direct manner. At the moment, we're now expanding this data warehouse, and we're adding sensors and other internet services. So we all collect it in one place, and we can then report it for the different stakeholders. So at the moment, for example, we have a weighing bridge data, which is sent directly to this database. We are using the mobile phones, we have sensors, laboratory data is all collected in one place. So from this central data warehouse, we can then generate data sets for every stakeholder. So for example, an operator will likely need much more detail than the local authority, who just might want to focus only on the main quantities. The same for the managers in our company, who don't want to see too much detail, but they want to see on the highlights how are things progressing. Similar, we can make views for researchers, waste collection companies. So how does it look like? So for example, here at the left, we have a view for our operators, where they can see on a daily basis what has been fed to our factory and in what concentrations, so they can follow the recipes. Meanwhile, on the right, it's a view for the managers, who can see, are we still on track on the different KPIs? And all this data is coming from the same source, and it's near real time available for the different stakeholders. So what's the news of this? I often hear when I explain this to people, they say, yeah, we can do this, but they are mostly surprised when we say we actually have this now running in West Africa for fecal sludge treatment, and that often surprises people. So in this case, it allows us to make operational efficiencies, so we can track all the historic data. It will also allow us benchmarking between the different factories. One big advantage is that we have now one company truth. So whenever we do a reporting to any funders or governments, we can always replicate it and then get the exact same data or results shown. This will also allow us to improve the access to sanitation services and improve public health monitoring, because this year's motto is to actually expand and scale up. So for example, we're now looking for Kumasi, we're working in Mali, in Uganda. If you have any questions or comments about what I've just covered in my presentation today, please leave them in the comment section, or please also consider joining one of the discussion live sessions to share your thoughts. You can find the schedule for these sessions on the agenda page. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being at this presentation today. I'm delighted to present to you a study that we did a year and a half back, and what the implications are for on-site systems in India. The study itself is called Anand, and it's been done by a team that I work in called the Scaling City Institutions for India, in the think tank called the Center for Policy Research in India. So as I take you through the presentation, I'll take you through a little bit of the context of FSM and the importance of on-site systems within FSM. I'll take you through the study itself, what the design parameters of the survey were, and what lessons we learned. And then finally, we'll do a little bit of a discussion around how we are using the information as we take the study forward into practice. So to start off with, as we know, 60% of India's urban households depend on non-network sanitation in general. This has been a reality in India since 2011, when the census brought out that much of our toilets were not connected with sewers, and most of them were connected to on-site sanitation systems. In spite of the large, massive program called the Swachh Bharat mission that happened in the last 5 years in India, we see that it only increases the reliance on FSM and on-site sanitation systems. And as per our early projections, it looks like that almost 960 million population in India is going to have to be dependent on FSM and on-site systems as we move forward. What essentially this means is that while over the last 5 years, FSM as a system got piloted in India, got scaled up across states, we are now in a phase where we want to ensure operational sustainability to achieve the outcomes from good, safe FSM. And therein, the focus of this study is to understand the role and significance of the first on-site system, which is kind of under-researched as yet in India, and has been very much of a black box so far. So as per common knowledge in the sector, there is a general understanding that much of these on-site systems remain weak on design, whether it's sizing, whether it's the hydraulic retention times, on the temperatures that they hold and degrade waste in. And we do know from earlier surveys, for example, that there is a lot of trade-off in the decision-making around what kind of on-site system is to be followed. These include, of course, the amount of capital expenditure that households can put on on-site systems. It depends on the space that's available in the location, the distance from, let's say, water sources, to talk about a few. But much of this understanding was very generalistic in India. And so as part of a survey, which we are now calling Unearth, where we did a survey of around 3,000 households across the country. We chose a sample which kind of focused, means in a sense was purposive, that we looked at smaller cities more than rural areas and larger cities, where on-site systems are more prevalent, essentially based on septic tanks. And we chose states and cities in our multi-stage inclusion criteria, where we looked at the soil type, the groundwater depths, the reliance on on-site sanitation, and of course the city population size. And we arrived at these 10 cities, which are marked on the map here. So what were our key findings? Our key findings were that 91% of all systems were tank-based, and the others were pits. However, in subsidy-led programs like the Swachh Bharat mission, more pits were built in terms of the pits being built on a regular basis in the past without Swachh Bharat mission or a government-supported subsidy program for toilets and on-site system. We then also found how the flow of the various parameters that we were studying around the location of the structure, the ventilation and that the on-site system has, the size of the on-site system, as well as the effluent management system, and that is part of the on-site system, of how these play out in this group of 3,000. And there were multiple failures, as you can see in this flow diagram here. We did find that privately constructed on-site systems were larger in size than subsidy-led ones in general. We did find correlations between household size and the MPC, that is the the expenditure that households have in general, to be very strong criteria, but much less around the number of users, the flushing type, the location within the house plot, and its distance from the water source, to be very strong determinants of the size of the on-site systems. We followed this up by looking at the deviance that these various on-site systems had from typical guidance that is in the codes. So there is a Indian Standard Code 2470 against which we evaluated what we found from our survey. And we found that only around 10% of them reach a score of 8 out of 10, for example, while most of them fail. So if it was a yes, no situation, only around 2% of the septic tanks would make the yes criteria, but there was a grading within it. In terms of leach pits, however, there was a higher compliance with the standards, but not so in terms of septic tanks. However, the typology of the pits, the leaching pits, were also varied, ranging from twin pits, which are promoted in the national program, versus pits, single pits that have been constructed quite often under the program itself, and rectangular, circular, we found a very interesting aberration of the standard design that the government supports by having the twin pits, instead of being parallel twin pits, being built in sequence. Alongside this, we also found that many of these are related to the kind of service, FSM service that one gets. And so we found that a lot of manual cleaning of these tanks and pits were also common. And so the broad takeaways were that both septic tanks and leach pits are non-compliant in most cases. Households use septic tanks to meet various needs, not only their sanitation safety needs, and stronger participation between the regulators and the service providers are key. How do we use this information as we take the FSM program in India forward? So there are two main areas that we are working in currently. One is standardizing prefabrication of septic tanks by working with the Bureau of Indian Standards and private operators to come up with new standards for prefabricated septic tanks, and to take in situ non-compliant construction into a prefabricated regulated regime. Alongside this, so in a step-by-step process, we are hoping to take, as India grows, it is still a very urbanizing country. As newer septic tanks come in, we are hoping that these new standards, which are informed both by ground realities and by technical requirements, can take India forward into a better space. Alongside this, we are also developing a national digital monitoring platform in association with an open source platform run by eGov Foundation, another of our partners, wherein we are trying to monitor the collection of information around on-site systems and of the desludging activities that happen, so that over a period of time, we can achieve better on-site systems across the country. Finally, do visit our website, which has much more details about the survey and our findings around what the constraints on on-site systems are, what informs decisions of households, and how these public policies have played out in shaping the on-site systems on the ground. And there is, of course, a journal article done by me and my colleagues that is also available in the Journal of Environmental Management. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining this presentation today. We will be delighted to hear questions and comments on the presentation and to hear about some of the overlaps or things that you found interesting from the study and the presentation. Do consider joining the live discussion session at the end of the day, as in the agenda page. Do also put in your comments in the comment section. We would be delighted to hear comments as well as connect with you. Do leave us your address. And in case we miss connecting during FSM 6, my name is Shubhagato Dasgupta, and I'm here based in Singapore, but much of our work is in India at the Center for Policy Research, Scaling City Institutions for India program. So please do connect with us, and we look forward to hearing from you in either of these three ways. Thank you.
I'm Suraj Kumar, and I'm joined with my colleague Mithun Anand here. We are here to give you a presentation of a decision support tool for inclusive sanitation interventions. So largely when we do any kind of a city planning for a sanitation domain, the hypothesis begin with that reason that why don't we provide services to everyone in the cities, and how do we plan and implement the sanitation interventions? In most of the cases, primarily in the developing and the underdeveloping world, when the sewerage systems are yet to get into a very larger domain and a lot of implications into all the cities here, what happens that you have also a domain with trouble with the sewerage systems. People saying that, why sewerage? We have, such a narrow lanes, and the people have dig out the whole road, and the sewerage systems have choked out. A lot of problems with the sewerage systems. But at the same time, you also have a problem with the toilet containment also. In a situation when toilets get filled up, you have an overflooding coming in, and there's a whole range of solutions here. You also have a situation where municipalities, all said and done, with all the planning and investment done in the sewerage and sanitation system, you say the desired result has not been able to achieve. Now, the larger purpose and the problem statement here for our presentation here, that all this planning and investment and all the kind of approach and the effort that has been laid out, is it leading to the citywide inclusive sanitation? Does citywide inclusive sanitations, a framework for providing access to all, a myth or reality? So this is a tool here to address that problem. The tool, we call it decision support tool for sanitation intervention. There are a lot of other tools also that we have which address the various domain of the sanitation interventions. Here, this tool is a holistic tool which talks about and takes into consideration of not just sewerage or FSM or DWATs, but a range of sanitation interventions in the cityscape. And what it does, it demarcates the areas in the cities with the possible scenarios of interventions, whether it is in terms of a sewerage, DWATs, or the fecal sludge management. Now, giving you a perspective here of the whole timeline that how this tool and which all places the tool has been adopted and how it has evolved. It started with 2017. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has given a grant support to Rajasthan government. It was supported with the ADB setup there with RUIDP. And the project started in 2016 and 17. This concept of delineating and coming up with such kind of a model had started. And then in 17, it was a kind of a binary intervention with in a cityscape with a FSM versus sewerage. So some of the pilot has been identified, and at that time also it was presented to FSM4 forum, also in the BMGF partners and meet at Senegal, and some of the other national platforms also, just to get a feedback and disseminate the kind of exercise and opportunities to have a cities in terms of both sewerage and non-sewerage interventions. And then we moved to Khulna as a full, fledged kind of interventions and a pilot testing exercise with SNVs, again funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations. And there we moved not just to the binary operations, we had all the three levels, FSM, sewerage systems, and the DWATs together, and also the regrouping and the whole assessment framework was revised. And what happened at the end of the study is that the phase 1 plan of the cities, the Khulna, water, and sewerage authorities, they have been able to convince with the citywide inclusive sanitation approach, and the framework is getting modified now. Also, the framework of 2 of the sewerage expansion of the cities, this whole analysis has created a foundation for that. Now, also currently in Khulna, there is a DWAT system getting implemented. The citywide inclusive sanitation tool has become a kind of a DST tool, has become a kind of a foundations to identify all those opportunities areas. And currently now in Madhya Pradesh, 8 towns of India, in Madhya Pradesh itself, which is again kind of a largely administered by Asian Development Bank with the support of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There, the tool has been significantly used in 8 cities. And now all the tender document implementation in the cities are following the same kind of a result, which the DSTs is coming up with. So giving you a kind of a overall picture here of the DST suitability analysis. It is based on some of the set of the framework. My colleague Mithun will get into the more detail of technicalities here, but just to giving you an overall picture, it is a kind of these parameters primarily deals with settlement typology, economic vulnerabilities, drainage coverage and typologies, groundwater vulnerabilities, accessibility level, water sensitive areas, topographies, and water supply coverage. And there is a whole set of sub-parameters for these parameters. And also against all these parameters, there is a suitability factor here, which can be either solely for the sewerage, NSS, or DWATs, or it can be a mix of it. So this parameters is kind of a foundations to translate the whole set of information into the GIS platform and accordingly do the suitability analysis and do that kind of interventions assessment in the cityscape. Now, if we see some of the delivered results using this tool and how it has started, so I'll, to give you a picture of a Khulna cities here, this is the kind of a final output that has come out with. If you see the left map, which is the entire cityscape and the finding here for the Khulna city level. Right side, you have a ward level, which is a kind of a further navigating the informations and a further detail. Now, these interventions, if you primarily see in the legend here in the Khulna, you have a 2 category here, which is a long-term interventions and the alternative interventions, primarily to help the city government to get a sense that where they need to do a immediate kind of a phase 1 planning and where basis to the fund consensus availabilities, stakeholders, interest and the demand from the kind of a key stakeholder there, what kind of option they have to choose for the next level of a planning if they want to go ahead with it. But clearly, if you see the overall picture here, the intent to provide each and every settlements of the cities with the kind of a suitable settlement they have, not to have any kind of a mismatch in the future course of time, but a kind of a holistic planning for 15, 20 years down the line. This is a second example that you have for the Madhya Pradesh. One of the 8 towns that Nagada is one of the 8 towns here. Nagada already have a proposal of a sewerage system coming in. When we tried and tested this tool on Nagada town, all these circle out area here that you see is a conflict areas. Conflict area as in like areas which primarily had been initially suggested with the sewerage systems approach to be connected. But here with our DST, we found there is a conflict to these areas, and all these conflicts have been, discussed and analyzed and brainstormed in detail. And the final solutions of these settlements, not just to only conflict areas, but also there were areas which was not covered by the sewerage system. So that area have been also looked into. And then the final interventions for Nagada is that each and every settlement is connected with the safe sanitation access, whether it is in terms of a sewerage, grey water solutions, FSMs or DWARDs, but the entire city is connected with that scape, and DST has been able to help that to get that kind of a picture here. Now, this is our first attempt in Rajasthan that we had done, although we have now advanced the tool like anything. This is where we started the Rajasthan, so I wanted to show pictures. And it was one of the town in Tong where the suitabilities and assessment has been done. Now, I'll request my colleague Mithun to take over from here and give you a perspective of the tool consideration. Mithun, over to you.
Yes, all right. So here in the section, I'll explain in detail how the tool is configured, what are the different components which are involved in the tool. Like we can see, there are multiple parameters which we need to consider for running the tool. Like, for example, settlement typology, built-up density, water, sensitive areas, etc., topography, etc. So, like as we have said, like collecting all these data from primary sources was one of the main concern for us. So what we have devised here over the years is to identify and extract some information through artificial intelligence and deep learning techniques. Like if you don't have, even for a developing country, availability of data was one of the main challenge. So through these techniques, we can extract information from high resolution satellite imageries. Like, for example, settlement typology and built-up footprint can be extracted rightly from high resolution satellite imagery through deep learning techniques. So this is one new approach which we have devised over here, and through other GIS and remote sensing techniques, we can create a larger database, geospatial database for any city. Even if we don't have much of the primary data available, we can extract and generate many information through these techniques. And so once when we have this particular database ready, through GIS and through multiple analysis, overlay analysis, raster suitability assessments, we can finally come up with a proper suitability assessment interventions. And here again, over the years, we have upgraded this system to develop it as a tool in ArcGIS platform. ArcGIS is one of the leading GIS platform, and this tool can be used in any of the ArcGIS platform. This is one of the advancements which we have done over the years. And in the way forward, we are also trying to implement a web portal, GIS-enabled web portal, where anyone, even without having an ArcGIS platform, can run the model, test the model, and get updates. And another advantage of making this DST tool is that even if we don't have, after 1 year, maybe when the data get revised or data get updated, we can renew the model, we can redo the model and get the output within a fraction of seconds. I'll just quickly explain some of the deep learning techniques which we have used here. For example, building footprint extraction was one of the key challenge which we had. Like most of the Indian cities or most of the developing countries, cities in Bangladesh and all those things, data was a major gap. So here, through deep learning techniques, we have identified building footprints. We can even extract the building height from the shadow which is generated from the satellite imageries, using the sun elevation angle, etc. So all these are scientifically proven methodology which we have adopted here in the tool. And another example is identification of settlement typology from aerial imagery. For example, in Indian cities, we can clearly differentiate between planned settlements, unplanned areas, and even slum settlements. So these can be trained using a GIS and deep learning techniques, and the system itself can extract and give you information about the different typologies which is available. And and another example is the extraction of road network using deep learning techniques, and even OpenStreet maps we have used in some of the cities to generate road networks. Another extraction of elevation data from open source DEM. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to simplify the complete model, and even a city without having much data information available, we can run the model and still get an output. For example, another example is flood vulnerability in water sensitive area. Through Landsat, recent Landsat 8 satellite imagery, we can have a complete picture of the water sensitivity, and through elevation data integrated with water sensitivity, we can have a flood vulnerability level assess. So all these will add on to our final intervention suitabilities. So as I've rightly said before, DST we have generated and made it as a tool in ArcGIS platform. So anyone, even if without knowing the coding background, we can run this particular model in ArcGIS platform and get the result. The main advantage of having a tool in ArcGIS platform is that even if we don't have, after a few years, maybe once when we have the data revised, the city gets changed every year. So every year we can redo the model and get a revised and new output. Yeah, over to you, Suraj.
Yeah, thanks, Mithun. So just to, as my colleague Mithun rightly mentioned, the data is a key challenge in the developing and on the other contexts here. But the data with the AI technology and the deep learning tool we have been able to overcome that. And even there is a data, nothing like it, but even there is no data, there is a data, nothing like it, but even there is no data, then also this tool works very fine. Even in some of the town that MP just talked about and showed you the interventions, especially like Nagada, there was a very minimal data available at the city authority. So this is one of the key USPs that we have it here, that this works as a rapid assessment tool, and it can give you a feasibilities for the cityscape in a very short period of time. This is one advantage. The other key advantage that it also gives you a sense of implementation phasing to the city authorities, that how you plan the sanitation interventions. Also, it also primarily give you a good contextual input for the designing the sanitation regulations for the cities. Coming to the ground result, which I talked about, but very quickly, 8 towns in Madhya Pradesh, they have adopted this tool and now going ahead with the implementations. 2 towns in Rajasthan, they have done the implementation already. Khulna city is now already planning the DWAT interventions, and also the phase 1 sewerage planning. They also have used and utilized this tool and doing it accordingly. Now, the way forward here, the last slide, is that now we have a tool which defines that, what should be the sanitation interventions and the phasing in the cityscape. The next version of it also can be combined together with the technology selections and the investment estimation. So it becomes a complete package and it's together. We already have the technology selections tool ready and we are working on the investment estimations. So for any cities, whether it needs a kind of a very advanced systems, mechanical systems, or natural waste treatment system, whether it is FSM or sewerage or mix of it, the tool would be able to help you in the decision making for the technology selections also. It is also now, we have figured out of the 11 or 12 data requirement, 8 can be extracted from the open sources and the AI platform, but also the rest of the data we are working so that this entire tool becomes a package where there is no data dependency at all for any cities if we have to apply to. Also, now we have already developed a web portal kind of a thing. So GIS software is something that we also understand the urban local bodies, everybody will not be that equipped with. So this model has been also, and it is a kind of a work in progress now. It has been translated and transferred to a web portal kind of a system. So anybody can use that kind of a portal and without having a know-how of GIS would be able to make a decision making on that. As I said, primarily data dependencies we are trying to further reduce. And again, last but not the least, but more pilot testing in different contexts and geographies is awaited for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.